When we think of dangerous organizations, we rarely picture a welcoming stage. No one intentionally signs up to have their autonomy stripped away. They are simply searching for a place to belong, and that initial phase of deep relational connection provides a profound sense of safety. But history shows a darker progression. Looking at early revival crowds like the one captured in this vintage photograph, you see the massive scale of that devotion. Yet many of these joyful, sprawling movements quietly solidify into rigid, abusive systems. The tension begins when magnetic leadership operates entirely without structural guardrails. Over time, pastoral care slowly dissolves into absolute control. Frameworks like the BITE model map out the structural, psychological, and theological layers used to capture and maintain a devoted following. Ultimately, a spiritual community rarely collapses from outside pressure. The greatest threat is often the unchecked charisma of its own leaders. Look at this diagram. What begins as a shared democratic community is eventually replaced by theocratic absolutism. The organizational structure collapses into a single top-down pyramid where one leader claims to be God's direct, unquestionable mouthpiece. This was the exact playbook used by early 20th century groups. Operating out of rural Appalachian churches like the one in this photograph, they bypassed constitutional negotiation and democratic voting entirely in favor of strict top-down mandates. In this environment, questioning a policy carries a heavy spiritual cost. Disagreement is reframed as an act of literal demonic rebellion. Internal critics are met with specific, coordinated attacks. Anyone asking for transparency is labeled a Jezebel or a cancerous element, a tactic designed to entirely invalidate their concerns and silence dissent. This isolation extends all the way to the top. Modern pastoral training within these structures explicitly instructs leaders that they cannot have friends in the congregation, ensuring no one can improperly influence the person in charge. A claimed divine mandate operates as engineered structural armor, built specifically to protect a leader's ego from any human accountability. With authority secured, leadership enforces behavior control through mandatory holiness standards, outlined in texts like this booklet of Bible truths. The rules reach extreme granularity, forbidding congregants from joining lodges, wearing gold ornaments, or deviating from strict dress codes. These rules micromanage the smallest details of life, from specific dress codes to prohibitions on entertainment. When the standard for holiness is this narrow, even a minor lapse in judgment becomes a visible indicator of a compromised heart. A teenager watching a movie, a woman wearing gold earrings, proves a spirit of rebellion. Members who fail are forced to return to the church hierarchy for spiritual restoration, handing over their autonomy in exchange for forgiveness. By policing appearance, speech, and entertainment, the leadership creates complete physical and social isolation. Members look and sound so different from the world around them that integrating anywhere else becomes impossible. The resulting social boundaries create an insulation zone. Prohibited from integrating into their local community, members remain trapped entirely within the organization's ecosystem. As the organization solidifies its power, a distinct shift occurs. The survival of the institution takes complete priority over the physical and emotional well-being of the people inside it. When systemic failures happen, the leadership deploys institutional gaslighting. Any abuse, burnout, or mismanagement is deflected and blamed entirely on an individual member's lack of faith or hidden sin. Even the church's art and music are weaponized to reinforce this dynamic. Congregants sing hymns that explicitly teach them that personal tragedy is their own fault, shielding the leadership from any scrutiny. When abuse reaches a crisis point, the parent organization utilizes decentralization as a legal shield to protect its own assets from liability. Organizations have argued in court that they cannot be held responsible for the actions of abusive local leaders, despite actively designing the exact model that granted those leaders unchecked authority in the first place. In a high-control religious system, the individual is always expendable. The abusive system is protected at all costs. Unchecked centralized authority rarely ends in peace. The inevitable endgame is severe organizational rupture, splintering factions, and profound religious trauma for the members left behind. Without independent oversight, charismatic leaders inevitably make massive administrative, theological, or financial mistakes. Because they cannot admit fault without destroying their claim to divine perfection, these leaders cover up their errors. They choose to split the church, rebranding their failure as a righteous holy war. To protect yourself, look for the 3 red flags shown on this checklist: financial opaqueness, an inability to handle criticism, and forced isolationism. True healthy community cannot exist in a vacuum. It requires democratic checks, absolute transparency, and independent boards to hold leadership accountable. A healthy spiritual leader's true strength is defined by their willingness to be questioned, never by a demand for absolute submission.